right, welcome to my presentation. My name is David Carpenter. I work at Washington International School. When I say I work there, I've worked there 2 days. I'm very new. I've made a couple trips in. My story will clearly be not about Washington International School, which is a pretty wonderful school where I'll be an instructional technologist. But it's about 2 international schools where my wife and I worked several years ago, in fact, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. My presentation today will be about curriculum development and the importance of teaming for TPACK, a big theme, 2 big themes that we've been talking about so far. So let me start my TPACK story with a little tale, a very short one, where I'd like to paint the picture of what a curriculum meeting looks like. We've been hearing a lot about division-wide rollouts from your districts, but mine is very much one school and one division in what we did. And so I want to show you in a very short way what it looked like, what we were doing in our curriculum collaboration meetings where we were TPACking. And as I'm an elementary instructional technologist, you know, elementary teachers, we really enjoy reading to our students. So I'm going to read a little story, so I want you to bear with me. I'm going to get my book over here and take a couple minutes and read the story. All right, so my story begins with Miss Carter. Miss Carter was an elementary teacher, and she very much wanted to become a better teacher. She loved to learn so that she could become a better teacher for her students. She read on Twitter about this construct called TPACK, where schools were using technology and integrating it into the curriculum to affect and enhance student learning. Ms. Carter reached out to her PLN, asking where she might find one of these TPACking schools. Before she knew it, her Twitter feed was filled with names of schools. One was nearby, and she contacted them to see if she could come over for a meeting. What really interested her was that they did more than just integrating technology. They really looked at technology as just one literacy, along with information, visual, and media, which they called the construct ICL. Ms. Carter had her students doing lots of inquiry units, so she made plans to visit this school, known for their ability to TPACK and skill students in finding and evaluating information. The big day arrived for Ms. Carter to visit the TPACK school. She arrived first thing in the morning and was met by an administrator. Ms. Carter was so excited that the first thing she had to ask was, "How do you TPACK?" The administrator smiled and said, "Come with me. I will show you how we TPACK." They then walked into a meeting room that was filled with very energetic people having very energetic conversations. Ms. Carter sat to the side, doing her best to contain her excitement. She could feel the TPACking energy all around her. One person was working at a computer that projected onto the screen what looked like a unit planning document. Another person was talking about learning goals in the form of big ideas. Someone jumped in to talk about the school-wide effort to bring inquiry into the curriculum. After a while, the group moved into talking about how to assess how well the students would reach the learning goals of the unit. Ideas were being bounced around the meeting table as 2 participants shared ideas about using technology and giving students choice over how they could share their understanding. Another voice chimed in on how to differentiate nonfiction reading materials, which led to another person adding, "What if we," and the conversation continued. So that gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what I'm hearing probably occur in many of your schools as you get together to discuss curriculum. Now what I want to do is move on to our story, and I say our story because it's really my wife, Margaret, who's a library media specialist in Fairfax County where we live. It's a journey that she and I took as international teachers going back to the 1990s and kind of working our way around the world. The goal in sharing our story is to demonstrate how educators working together to design curriculum while using the TPACK construct can really get the benefits of TPACK into the classroom. One of the themes that's been coming up is that gap. We have the theory of TPACK, bringing people together, but how do we make sure it really gets in the classroom? And for us, it was through the curriculum. Hopefully it will be evident that the process of having teachers collaborate with learning specialists, and that's an additional thing that we had, to TPACK together forms a natural learning community where professional growth is ongoing. So the whole process of being in curriculum meetings and TPACking is in itself professional development. I will also quickly share the backstory of how Margaret and I learned important lessons in one school that we would carry forth to the school where we did our curriculum development system. I will share a link to a video that outlines the who, what, why, and when of our curriculum review system. There isn't time now to go over those nuts and bolts of how it really worked. So I put a video together and I'll show you where that link is. I will also cover a section of the video where I talked about dropping the T's. So I'll leave that little teaser with you, and I'll go over that in just a few moments. And I'll finish with some reflections. Our pathway, as I shared, was an international one. We've taught in many different schools, but a couple schools really stood out for us. One was the American International School of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and that was in the early 1990s. I had been a social studies teacher, and that was when I moved to being a counselor. My wife, at that point, was a social studies teacher. We both worked in the middle school at that time. This school really was an incredibly top-notch, very structured, systematic place where we learned a lot about the structures and the systems that we would carry to our next school, Hong Kong, where we would develop this curriculum review system. We arrived at the school as it was changing from a junior high to a middle school model. So there was a lot of change going on, and that seems to be a constant that many of us have been talking about. The teachers were learning to broaden their perspectives to look at the social and emotional needs of the students. And so one of the ways they did that was how they structured their meeting times so that they could work together to discuss student needs and the curriculum to better support the needs of our very special middle school students. One of the great things about middle schools, as we know, is that they're set up on teams, and in many of them you have your different houses and your teachers are working together. So right from the start we were picking up on the power of teaming and collaboration. Another thing that we noticed there is that on the days when the teams would meet to discuss either the curriculum or the students, that the special teachers would be there as well, the counselor, the ESL teachers, the learning support, and the tech teacher. With the middle school model, as you're familiar with, is that the teams are run by the teacher leader who facilitates the meetings, who set the agenda, who do the long-term planning. So that was another structure, that teacher leadership that we really picked up on. We learned a lot from that. Another structure that we noticed was sheltered and shared meeting time. As we spoke about yesterday, one of the constants in our lives as teachers is dealing with time. There was a sheltered meeting time for each of the teams where one day, as I mentioned, was each week was set aside for curriculum discussion, and one day was set aside for student discussion. Another construct, again, that we all keep talking about was the power of professional development. In that case, I think our school was very much ahead of the curve, that from the start it was very differentiated. One of the things about living in Saudi Arabia, it can be an interesting place. You do a lot of desert camping. You like to buy gold, and always very friendly, warm people, but it wasn't a place where there was a lot of activity going out and doing things. So it led to the school to be somewhat insular, which meant we put a lot of time into our professional development. So the school spent a great deal of funds to send people all over the world to learn and to come back, and everyone understood the expectation that they would come back and share with their compatriots. And we used a system called Teachers Teaching Teachers, TTTs, which we hear about all the time now, where you would come back, and throughout the year, different teachers would give their workshops on many different topics, and we, as teachers in the school, would choose which ones we wanted to go to, which ones met our needs. All right, from there we took all those structures in this very systematic school, very well-run school, because it was a very large school for international schools, K through 9th grade. That's as far as they went, over 2,000 students. So our next stop, Hong Kong. We arrived in 2001. We had a little bit of change for Margaret and I as we went in. And there we built on that foundation that we had in Riyadh to develop our curriculum review system. Margaret and I worked in the upper primary grades, 3 to 5, and I was now working as an instructional technologist, and Margaret had shifted to be a library and media specialist and our gifted ed coordinator. And this was another large school as well. There were 600 students just in our 1, 3, 4, and 5 fifth grade classes, class levels, yeah. So we arrived with a lot of change going on. There were two big initiatives. One was the whole idea of the school was going to really start reviewing its curriculum. Year by year, they were going to pick a different subject area to review. Our first year, it was language arts. A second big initiative was building on the power of teaming. Because the school was so large, like in 5th grade, there were 9 classes. They began to team the teachers in groups of 3, and there was a lot of professional development to help the teachers understand how to run those meetings, how to have critical conversations, how to work together. It's not an easy task. The big aim for the collaboration was really to take it to a new level. The grade levels had been working pretty much as a grade level, but they'd not been kind of drilling down and being much more efficient and getting much more out of their smaller learning communities. So that was a big idea to take the collaboration to a new level. There was ongoing professional development in subject areas that were consistently math, reading, science specialists coming in, really working on content and pedagogical knowledge. There was broad technology and pedagogical support that was provided by myself and by my wife Margaret, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, that we really were partners out of school and partners in school as well. And we brought in this idea of doing these TTTs, but the thing that really helped us, much like in Riyadh, that there was sheltered, structured time for the grade level teams to meet. So PD was not an extra, and that was a big deal. We were very fortunate. Jay McTighe came in for 3 days to work with us in bringing in the Understanding by Design construct, because we said we wanted to do curriculum, but we didn't know how to really develop a system. Jay gave us the pathway to follow, and from that, the curriculum director, the science coordinator, myself and my wife designed a curriculum review system that we put together as a pilot, and then we rolled it out and got input from the teachers and improved it over the years. And much of the system was based upon collaboration and the power of TPACK when you bring people together. The system would be built upon structures of teaming, distributive expertise, of curriculum team members, and of specialists who would come into the meetings. Margaret, myself, and when we could get our learning specialists to come in as well. As I mentioned, that another structure was sheltered planning time, and also the setting of timelines in preparation for curriculum meetings, and built-in accountability. If you watch the video, you'll see how we used our curriculum mapping tool to set follow-up tasks that people had to follow. And if they didn't, the teacher leaders of the process would hold them accountable. We drew from the Understanding by Design process to adapt, like I said, and further develop our system. And one of the things that was really helpful was developing a unit planning template, and we adapted it to meet our needs, because each year the school had school-wide initiatives and goals that they'd set, and we would include that into the structure of the templates, because as we know, the structure, if you build it in, it makes it easier to follow and implement it. So that was one thing that we adapted from Jay and Grant. The other initiative that started our second year was a school-wide professional appraisal and growth system, where we brought in the work of Charlotte Danielson it was much more a professional growth than an appraisal system. Teachers were setting SMART goals, and one of the things that really helped us with the T of TPACK is that they had to set goals around their integration of technology and information literacy. So that was a big part of the process in how we move forward with TPACking. One more thing I want to share about the professional growth is that Margaret and I and other teachers who had experience with the technology and the literacies area would go into the team meetings after we design units of study, whatever technologies were going to be used, whatever type of research was going to be used, and we would offer that training to the teachers during that time. So like I just said, the ICL, and I'll explain that term in just a minute, it's going beyond just technology, was embedded into the teacher's professional and growth system, and it was embedded in our curriculum review system. And from the start, we learned from Jay and Grant, the focus was always on student learning, and it was not on the technology. All right, what I'll mention just here, I did put this video together that really goes into detail about how we ran this curriculum review system, very systematic, had certain structures in place. It gets into the nuts and bolts of the process. So what I decided to do was to create this video, and as I teach first and second graders, they asked me at the end of the year, they said, Mr. Carpenter, you always have us doing these screencasts, these videos, making our thinking visible. That's one of the themes of part of my pedagogy. And where's your video? And I said, okay, I'm going to do one this summer. So a couple weeks ago, I put my mind to it and I created this video. But one of the things I wanted to do was really honor these students. So I kept my drawing and my artistic ability at a first grade level. So when you watch it, you'll see that, yep, Dave, you definitely are on par with those first graders. So you'll find a link to the video in the Washington International School SkyDrive folder. I wanted to just mention one section of that video because I think it's really important as a takeaway. There were two other big changes that occurred at HKS, Hong Kong International School, involving the T, the instructional technologist and the librarian, my wife and I. We joined forces to form a new approach to technology integration that was much more library science focused. And we started that from day one when we arrived there. But by 2004, it looked like that was something that we wanted to do school-wide. So in 2004, all the divisional librarians, instructional technologists, teachers, administrators, we all came together to write our standards and benchmarks for a combined technology and library science integrative approach. The instructional technologists and librarians had already, as I said, moved away from a technology approach. We were really focusing on the process of skilling students and how they gathered, how they analyzed, how they curated, how they created, and how they communicated information. That's something you see a lot now. You go out on the blogs and Twitter, folks are talking about that. But our librarians at Hong Kong back in the early 2000s, they were doing it back then and really provided that leadership. So this partnership expanded beyond the T that you might have heard of ICT, Information and Communication Technologies, and we decided to drop the T and replace it with an L. So now back then, we called it Information and Communication Literacies, and it's something that we've carried forth to all the different schools we've gone to. My last school, Alexandria Country Day, the librarian and I did the same. We came together, and that was our curriculum and integration approach. And as I go to Washington International School now, they're doing the same thing. The last little area, and I probably get in trouble with with TPACK Nation out there, is now that I look back and we didn't know what TPACK was, we were just doing it. And that's one of the things that keeps coming out. It's just a process that brings people together to find a better way to help students learn, that if I'd known about TPACK, I think we would have changed it to ICL-PACK. All right, let's jump to reflection. So here's some takeaways. Very clearly, this partnership of the instructional technologists and the library media specialists is very, very important because we were seen as teaching partners. I was not seen as the tech guy. My wife was not seen as the librarian who handed out books. She was seen as a master teacher. Maybe not me as a master teacher, but someone who was a teaching partner. And as I spoke about earlier, we were leaders of the process of TPACking and the curriculum review. So with everything, someone has to own it, facilitate it, and really work to make sure you follow through. Another theme we keep talking about is the change process. And I think really what made our change process work so well is that it was teacher-led, that this curriculum review system that you'll see on the video was led by the teachers. Much as in Saudi Arabia, where we had our middle school teams led by the teachers, the curriculum review process was led by the teachers. And they had different roles in the process, but number one, they led the process. Back to learning communities. I'll state the obvious. When you're TPACking, you have a learning community. So we came together, we developed curriculum. We were TPACking, we didn't know it. And as that process went through, unit after unit, grade after grade, we were learning from each other, and that was our own professional development. Curriculum-based ICL integration, it's just such a natural fit, as I was just saying, where everyone, almost everyone, over time learns the different roles, and that's what TPACK is obviously all about. That your third grade teacher who's been doing these curriculum review meetings for a couple of years has learned a lot of tools. She's learned about research. She's the one who, after a while, feels confident to say, why don't we use this research method? Or why don't we use these websites? Or your GATE coordinator, who's been working with her gifted kids so much, knows the content, and so she might start talking about the content in a meeting. So it's wonderful to see everyone switching those hats. One of the things that we did with our professional development and our teaching of the students is it was always just in time. We did not do, we didn't have a set library schedule, and we didn't have a set technology teaching schedule. Because our curriculum was embedded into the regular language arts, history, science units, we would just look into the curriculum mapping tool, see when the unit was coming up, contact the teachers and say, when can we come up and teach or co-teach? And then when the professional development for the teachers to understand the tools or whatever literacies were being taught, what was important is that a lot of times they would just be they would always be in the room when we were teaching. So that was one way they learned. But if they wanted more individualized instruction, we would come up during their sheltered meeting time. So quick follow-up. If you want to read more about our curriculum review system, Margaret and I wrote an article back in, I think it was 2005 or so, about this curriculum review system. You can go and take a look. I've given a shortened link. The link is also in our SkyDrive folder. And the second link goes to a more in-depth article that gives a lot more information, that breaks it down into our timeline, roles, using the curriculum mapping tool. A lot of it that you'll find in the video. So again, those two links are in the SkyDrive. Further follow-up, if it sounds like everyone's got you have your own curriculum review systems, but if you wanted to review them, maybe they're not measuring up, they're not getting the fruition of TPACK into the classrooms, maybe it's time for a checkup, and one way to do that is a site I put together about collaboration and curriculum. It's around a whole set of topics, and then just list after list of questions that you can ask your stakeholders as you review your current system or if you want to design one. And finally, Margaret and I, our story continues. She works at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Fairfax County. She doesn't blog. I wish she would, but she often shares a lot of great ideas with me, and I put them up in my blog. And then I work with my good buddy over here, Dr. Hofer. We do a podcast together where we talk about TPACK, and I'm very excited at Washington International School. It's a very collaborative learning environment and teaching environment. That's a big part of the IB program. So I'm going to be learning a lot there, and I'll be sharing it through my blog and through our podcast. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that information was helpful for you.